This meeting is being recorded.
There will be opportunity for you to chat and join in with the session. I fully understand if you don't wish to have your mics on while we're in the session, and sometimes it's actually helpful if you don't have your mic open. But there will be some times when it would be useful to have a conversation as a group, just as we would do if this was a face-to-face session at Rockingham, and to join in, so that please, I hope in those sort of situations you can turn your video on and turn your mic on, and we'll be able to see you joining in. There will be some breakout rooms, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we're going to work it in a little while. So you can see there the introduction is, we're going to talk a little bit about what the course is and what we hope will happen. This session today, we're going to be looking at your contexts, and the context of your school and the context of Rotherham and the area a little bit wider, and how that perhaps fits into a national picture. We're going to look at some key information about pupil premium. When I first started doing these sessions, it was before the DFE had changed their style and strategy of your pupil premium documents. Hopefully many of you will have clear pupil premium strategies identified that will be research informed. And so some of what we're going to be doing in the next few weeks is looking at those and deciding whether they are the right thing, deciding whether you need to change them, how you're going to go about implementing them. Some of you I know are new to your roles, and so it'll be perhaps filling in some background on that and how we can make all of those as research informed as possible. So this is part of a program which is doing with ROSIS and with the Research School Network wider. I was chatting only this morning with some national people about the project. So it's part of a bigger thing, and we're going to be working on this all the way through the next 2 terms. And just to reassure you that it's all free. Here are the sessions that we hope to be running in this part of it. So this is the core program that we'll be running, and you can see that there are a number of sessions. There are going to be 3 face-to-face or done like this online, and you can see the dates for them. Just when people were arriving, I was talking to Pam. There are meetings that happen in the afternoons, and 3 till 5 is the recommended time or the suggested time. They will be fairly full time. I suspect I will aim to finish well before 5, but it is going to be a 2-hour-ish slot. There will be a break in the middle. And then in between these sessions, there will be a small amount of self-study, self-reflection to do. Some of these will be things that would probably form part of your job anyway. Things looking at this pupil premium strategy, thinking about your staff, thinking about where they are and implementing policies and things, so that I hope that it won't be too onerous, and that there should be time, particularly in the next and the session 3 and 5, where there will be time for you to do a little bit of thinking and planning, so that when you leave the meeting, there won't be a great long list of things to do, but there will be some things to take forward. And then when we finish these sessions, then there will be a workshop, and we will be joined in the workshop by some of the schools that did this same project last year, the phase 1 schools. And you can see that they will join us for the implementation workshop. And within the Research School Network, one of the things that we are finding is that it's all very well being research informed. It's all very well having a good understanding of the research. But I think if we're honest as school leaders, and I was a school leader for many years in secondary, we don't always get it right in terms of turning our great policies and our ideas into embedded practice in school. and there's a lot that is known about change management and the research behind changes in schools. And so the implementation workshop will be something that we will work through, and then that will help you with the important bit about implementation, which is getting the planning right, but also getting the evaluation right. Because again, one of the things we know within the Research School Network, and I'll be honest, I'm not sure we've still got it right in my own school here in Sheffield, that we're very good at starting things, we're very good at planning and implementing them. We're never 100% sure whether they've actually had an effect. And so evaluation is going to form part of that. And then later in the summer, there are some workshops which are on themes that we've agreed with ROSIS to do with attendance and oracy and early reading. And these are themes that came out of their discussions, people like Pam and others having discussions with you and your other colleagues. And these are topics that the phase 1 people also identified as strategies that were requiring perhaps a closer look. And if you've cracked attendance in your school, fantastic. I know we're struggling with attendance here, and we know that oracy and early reading are important, and we'll look at why that is the case. And again, we will be organising those sessions. If Pam, if you're still there and listening, we could do with sorting out those dates as soon as possible, I think, so that we can get those advertised.
We'll do that, yes.
Yeah. So just we'll have a phone call after the session. Is that okay for everybody so far? Is there anybody wants to ask about that system, the way that the program is going to work? Okay. So the resources available for this are all on a Padlet. And I will put this into a chat. I'll just bring that up if you bear with me 1 minute. If you've not used Padlets before, they're really great for sharing resources. And if I put that into the chat, can the first person that goes to it give me a thumbs up to say that it's working? Or open the mic and just say it is. Yes, great. Thanks, Leon. Thanks, Lee. Sorry. So you will see that there is a link through to the implementation guidance, which was some of the pre-session reading that you may have done. And then there is a set of resources that I will refer to in the session. And you'll see that there are columns for future sessions. And going into session 1 by the end of this evening will be this PowerPoint, and the recording will be here, and this will be the store, if you like, for the various documents that are there. Okay. And we'll refer to some of these documents. The things like the geographical analysis, and there'll be guidance reports and other documents from the EF. They're just there so that you can access them. There are links to them in the PowerPoint to the original source of them, but it's just easier, we find, if we put them all there in the Padlet. And it means that you can get there afterwards. I am not precious about any of this. There's nothing in there that is going to be private, so that if you wanted to show bits of the clips to other people, that would be fine. It would be great if you could let us know that is happening. And if you find yourself having to leave early, then you'll know that the rest of the session is available. Try not to run it on 1.5 times though when you're watching it back, because my voice sounds funny. Okay, this is the things that we want to look at today. I know that you're all very busy people, and it may well be that you can't all attend all of them, but it does help to kind of build that community. I am going to be putting you into breakout rooms. I will endeavour to make sure that you stay in the same breakout rooms so that you can have conversations with people. And you know, some of you will all know each other, but it is we found from the first phase that those parts of the sessions are some of the most useful and things that people most valued in this. We are going to be sharing practice. You may well be talking about things that happened in your school. So obviously we need to be respectful of that and not talk about them outside of the meeting. And I know it's hard. I think I've seen one person who's managed to escape off home first, which is great. But I realize that you could be in offices and you could have people coming in. But if we can try to keep distractions to a minimum, please ask me challenging questions, but also be prepared to answer some challenging questions. And if you haven't put your name and role into the chat, and if you've just joined, that would be lovely. Are we okay, folks? Okay, so we're going to move now into the main point of the session. There will be time for a break at about 4 o'clock or shortly after. And as I said, I aim to finish about 5 to 5, something like that. It will be a fairly full session, this one, but and there will be quite a bit of input from me, but there will be times when you will be in breakout rooms and times for personal reflection. And please, if there is anybody at any time wants to ask anything or say anything, please put it into the chat. I will endeavour to keep track of that. In future sessions, there will be 2 of us. I'll be joined by my colleague, Jenny Weir from St. Catherine's Primary School, who is our assistant research lead. And so that will make it easier. But for today, it will just be me. So I will just be just having to do more than things at once. If I get distracted, please bear with.
I'll keep an eye on it for you, Alistair.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we'll make a start, and we'll have a think about what we're doing, and it is this importance of learning together today. But we do know that nothing is going to change in your school because of this meeting. Or during this meeting. It's going to be the things that happen afterwards that are going to be the important things. And so if we're thinking about the sort of in-school descriptors about what this looks like when we're talking about pupil premium and working with children with pupil premium and improving their outcomes, then the sort of things that we'll be looking at are the sort of descriptors that are on here. And so I'll just go quiet for a minute and let you read through them. And so, you know, looking through some of these things, there's nothing groundbreaking here. We'll look at this high expectations, and I'm sure all of you will say that you have, and your teachers will have. But it's the question sort of like, are all non-teaching staff involved with this? We're going to be looking at the use of data and making sure that we understand our context and the real background behind some of the things that we want to improve, our priorities. The pupil premium strategy now takes this tiered approach, and if you are perhaps new to this, you may not be aware of what that means, and so we shall look at that in perhaps more detail in the second session, but we will raise it later on this afternoon. We've got to do some training, and we may have to do some training. We may have to train some teachers, we may have to train some non-teaching staff, and the big thing is that when we're talking about pupil premium strategy, we're concentrating on quality first learning and teaching. And so again, we need to think about that. I know that when I was a senior leader, you had to get your pupil premium strategy written and onto the website, and you did that, and you breathed a huge sigh of relief, and you waited till next year when you did it again. But I hope that you have access to your pupil premium strategies. If you don't have it now, that you'll go away and find it before the next session. And the idea is that this will become a kind of living document that you will keep referring to, that you will use and develop. It's not intended to be fixed, but there are things about it that have changed in recent years. And we're just making sure in this session that you understand all of those. And then also that you're going to sort of the clear outcomes of what you expect from the spending that you may have for the pupil premium provision, and that your pupil premium strategy fits in with the overall mission of the school. Some schools don't have another strategy. This is their school development plan becomes their pupil premium strategy, because so much is encapsulated within that it sort of overflows into other areas of school life. And so that it may well be that this becomes the key thing away from other strategy documents. And we see that it's as having three strands in our terms of our work with the pupil premium children. We have the pupil premium strategy, but also a strategy is useless unless it's implemented. And underlying and joining all these together is the evidence. And so a lot of what we will talk about today will be evidence-based. I will refer a lot of times to the guidance reports. When you look at your strategy document and consider it, then you will know that you have to justify your spending in terms of it being research informed. And we want that to be meaningful. We don't want it to be just a citation. It really helps if we can understand what the research is saying, so that we know what are the active ingredients that really make that research work in our context. And then, of course, we need to implement it. And so these are the three strands that we're going to be looking at. And then at the end, how do we know that we're actually making a difference? How do we monitor what we're doing as we're going along, and how we can evaluate it? Now, I know that you will have got your pupil premium strategy complete. You probably had to have it onto your website by the 31st of December. And so what we're really looking at is developing it and thinking about implementation. And these may be things that we're looking at for the future. It could also be things that you are going to stop doing, because when we looked at phase one of the big concerns we had was that more and more people were doing more and more things, and we have to think about workload, we have to think about our staff, we have to start making decisions about through monitoring and evaluation, is what we are doing really working. Some of the schools that I visited in the previous session, previous phase, huge long lists of things that they were doing to try to ameliorate the situation they found themselves after COVID. And it was becoming almost a block on future development because there was so much going on. And how do we know which of those works, which of the important things are some things we're going to be looking at? If you have had a chance to look at the implementation guidance reports, it's in the Padlet, you will be familiar with this diagram. And I will put my hand up and say, at times I have been guilty of implementing strategies as an event. We've had a big launch on a training day at the start of the year or in the summer. We've done the training, we've produced glorious handouts, and that largely has been it. But now we know that there is a lot more to implementing, and you will be perhaps familiar with this guidance report and the idea that implementation is no longer an event. Implementation is a process, and we are somewhere at the top. We have got things that we might be implementing already, and what we are going to be looking at is, are they still a key priority? Are they still things that we know are amenable to change? Are we looking at new things? How do we know this information? We're kind of just coming in that area between, 11 o'clock where we're finishing off things that maybe you've started, and looking at 1 and 2 o'clock where we might be starting to think about some new things. And when we look through the sessions, you'll see that we're somewhere on these two sessions, on session 1, these two circles here. We've done something about an introduction to all of this, and we're looking to see about the blue ones, because the thing that we do know is that exploring and checking that what we want to do is the best thing to be doing is something that takes the longest time. I was saying to somebody only a few days ago, I was a contact from a head of science who'd been told by his line manager in secondary school that they had to bring in some cognitive science into their lessons, without any real understanding about, is that the right thing to do? Is that the most important thing to do? And sometimes when we make these decisions, we're not making them for the best of reasons. It could be something that you're doing that is perfectly reasonable and a good thing to do, but is it the priority? Is it the most important thing? And one of the other things that we'll look at is, are these things the symptom of the problem, or are they the cause? And so we'll be exploring what this means and looking at the chat, looking at the evidence and the thinking behind this. I'm just going to check the chat, and 1 or 2 people have joined later. I've just put back into the chat the address of the Padlet, where some of the resources that you will need for this session and future sessions will be found. Okay, so the first thing, as we said right back on the introduction slide, is we're going to start looking at the context of disadvantage. And this is one of those things that I know that some of you are very experienced head teachers, and you are probably very aware of the performance of your disadvantaged students and all your students in your care. Some of you will know a small amount about this, perhaps, of where it fits. You may have some awareness of where Rotherham sits. But what I'm going to do is to show you some of this, and also show you some resources where, if you're interested, you can dig a bit deeper into this yourselves after the session. So we're funded by the Education Endowment Foundation, which is a charitable organisation that was set up by the coalition government about 10 or so 11 years ago, and has just recently been reaffirmed its foundation. And because it is a foundation, it is sort of beyond direct political party control. So the current governments have given the organisation a lifespan which will be beyond the next election, and it gives us a certain amount of independence. And our organisation, I'll talk about this a bit later on, is to break the gap between, or to reduce the gap between disadvantaged children and their non-disadvantaged peers. And as we all know, the gap has remained consistently, stubbornly present. And at the moment, with the latest figures that we have, and this is difficult because of the various changes to exams that we've had in recent years, for children leaving secondary school, disadvantaged children are about 18 months behind their non-disadvantaged peers. But this gap widens with time, but it starts early. And even in early years, on average, disadvantaged children are achieving less well than their more advantaged peers. And we'll look at the causes behind some of this, and we'll look at the background to it. We're aware that COVID and lockdowns and children's continued poor attendance and continued illness and missing school is having an effect. And research has been done to show some of the effects of this, and we know that disadvantaged children in particular, and different groups within that, were affected differently within school. we'll have a chance to talk about this in a few minutes' time, but we'll review some of the evidence that has come up on this. But as I said earlier, that the sort of split, the division between advantaged and disadvantaged children happens right from right from the start, and there are reasons behind this, perhaps. And so, what I'd like you to do, if you're watching this after the event, as it were, you might pause at this point and have a think. What I'm going to do is to drop you very quickly into a chat room. Sadly, the slide will disappear when you do that. But what I want you to do, if you're thinking about, is what are some of the factors, what are some of the relationships between socioeconomic position and attainment? What is it that causes some of these things? I will try to use the same chat rooms in the future, and so this is an opportunity for you to say hello and get to know each other. And then if somebody can be prepared to just shout out when we get back together again. It will be quite quick. I will keep it down to about 5 minutes, but this is just to get us thinking, what are some of the things that happen at all of these stages that cause this gap in the achievements of disadvantaged and then non-disadvantaged peers. So just bear with while I put you into breakout rooms. Okay. A. Brooks, are you okay? Can you get into a breakout?
Sorry, someone's just come to speak to me.
No problem. No
about
problem.
Something. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Thank you.
we've popped back, Alistair. We couldn't hear anybody.
Okay, I apologise for that.
It's all right. We've asked you.
There was just one. There was just one other person in your group temporarily because one of your breakout room people had somebody had just literally come to see them, and so they just.
Oh, it's all right. It's Anston Brook at the bottom, but we waited. We couldn't hear anybody. We couldn't see anybody. So.
Okay. I think it was Anston that was the person that came that had somebody come to visit. So. It looks like room 1 are really talkative because they're going to hang on till the bitter end.
Meeting is being recorded.
Okay. Would somebody from room 1 like to just talk about some of the things that you might have talked about, things that might contribute to this?
All in Pepperlica.
I can't remember who was in group 1, but
I can't remember.
That was H. Thorpe, Lynn Pepper, Sarah Birch.
Yeah, we talk. We were talking about things like being in environments that are language rich or just having conversations. And then we got onto the conversation about childhood experiences, going to the seaside, you know, the park, the theatre and the cost of that. But then Nikki, who's in this group with me, was talking about even basic experiences that we expect young children joining EYFS would have, and they haven't.
Yeah, so things like when we have the malleable area and we have we want children to use Play-Doh and roll and cut and things like that. Well, some of our children have never done baking before, so they don't understand what those pieces of equipment are and what that would be like. So again, they're starting from a lower point. So it's things like that that we sometimes presume that they've got experience of.
Great. Anybody want to add anything from room 2? I have that as Mel and Ruth Stone and one other.
We talked about sort of the impact of parents again on their children if they've had really poor experiences of school or authority or education, then that can also then be passed on to their children's attitudes towards school. And you know, you've got to kind of have a two-pronged approach of befriending and getting, you know, parents feeling more positive about education, as well as, you know, heightening children's aspiration and engagement with school as well.
I was reading there's a very good free journal called the Journal of Emergent Science, which is aimed at primary colleagues, and it's looking at early years and primary science education, particularly early years. And there was an article in there, and a recent one from a scientist called Gina Rippon, who's looking at gender stereotypes and talking about children as young as 5 and 6 who are making assumptions about roles that they will take on, and I am going to play like this because mummy expects me to, or daddy expects me to. And these some of these gender attitudes are fixed or begin to be fixed at a really young age, and so that early parental attitude is really important. I've got down on my list here of things like cultural capital, and that's was some of the things that you were talking about, and with language and things that we'll come back to. But all sorts of things that have in here as well. We also have ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and many of us are trauma informed. And so that we know that there are effects on this. And some of these things are developmental. Some of these things we now know have a neuronal basis, and children's brains are affected by some of the events that they have. So that the causes are many. I think also in the back of our heads, though, that we need to remember that these are kind of like mean and average events, and that within our pupil premium cohort, there will be children for whom none of those things are true, and that, you know, we still have to remember that within our pupil premium cohort there are a whole load of individuals. Okay, thank you for that. And so moving on, and one of the things that you know, somebody mentioned, I think it was Ruth or Lynn mentioned, this idea about the word gap, and this is a piece of research that we are increasingly aware of, that children of families will have very different experience of vocabulary. They'll have parents who have a wide vocabulary and use them and will talk to their children with that wide vocabulary, and then there will be other cases. I was amazed at this. You may all know this already, and I don't know, we'll see, to find out what the average reading age of adults in the UK is. If anybody would like to put into the chat what they think it is. You could just guess. Thank you, Lee. You're all too high. You need to go lower. Mel's closest. Thank you, Lee. 9 is the correct answer. The average adult reading age in the UK is comparable to a child of 9, which is why many of the sort of shall we say more popular newspapers pitch their reading age at around that. So things like The Sun has a reading age of about 8 or 9. So those of you that were choosing 15 or 16, you must be the Guardian readers, because that's the rough reading age for the Guardian. They reckon that there are about 16% of adults that are functionally illiterate, and that means that they are even below that kind of year 9 kind of level. And so if they are functionally illiterate at home, this is going to affect the children. These were figures that were new to me just recently, and I was quite amazed that was the case. And the literacy is one of those things that you may have seen that we've talked about more widely now. And literacy isn't always a cause, but it can be a marker for social disadvantage. But also there is what we call the Matthew effect. And this comes from the reference in St. Matthew's Gospel, where it goes something like, unto everyone that hath shall be given, and have abundance, from him that have not shall be taken away. And it's called the Matthew effect because basically, if you have a good grasp of literacy, you have an early grasp of literacy, then you improve at a faster pace, and the gap widens as you get older. And so literacy and reading, and it's why early reading interventions are something that we're going to look at, because we understand that this is so important. Into the Padlet are a couple of documents which are about the key findings. It's difficult to really make comparisons over the last few years because the data set is very variable. You'll know that we've had SATs and not had SATs, and we've had teacher assessments and not GCSEs. And so trying to get consistent data over the last few years is very difficult. And so some of the data in the next few slides is a couple of years old, but it does give us some principles to be working at. And there are links here, and the documents are also in the Padlet. So something we've talked about before already, which is that there is a disadvantage gap. The disadvantage gap exists across all schools and is very similar in schools that are classified as outstanding and also schools that are classified as RI. The gap is persistent, and it starts young and it stays there. And if we look at children who are persistently disadvantaged, and so those children who sadly remain on pupil premium lists all the way through their school career, or for at least 80% of it, you will see that that is even wider. And this also hides regional differences. And I'm afraid to say that some of the local counties and boroughs around Rotherham and Barnsley and Sheffield, then that figure of 22 for persistently disadvantaged is closer to 24. It's 23 point something, I think, for Sheffield and Rotherham and this area. So that this persistent disadvantage makes up nearly 2 years of a gap by the time they get to GCSE. The gap was decreasing, and then up until 2018, 2019, it started to widen again. I have to be careful not to be political in this, but we have seen years of austerity and the lack of public funding and spending, and that has made levels of disadvantage worse, and that has had an effect in terms of outcomes. And so the gap was beginning to widen slightly even prior to COVID, and we know that it has widened since. It's also within our pupil premium, there's some what you might call intersectionality, so that people can be have multiple reasons to struggle. And so you can see within there that there are ethnic groups which also show an attainment gap, as well as a pupil premium gap. And this is one of the first bits of your kind of post-session reading, if you're interested. In the Padlet, there is a geographical analysis pack, and this enables you to go through the various areas in Rotherham, Barnsley, Sheffield, and start to dig into it. It's also got some information on political constituencies, and you can start to see the sort of figure for your area. You can start to make comparisons perhaps to how you're doing compared to the average in your area. Again, some of this data is difficult to get up to date. The 2020 figures are probably 1918 before COVID, and they haven't got all of this data collated yet from then. But you can see from the sort of graphs on the side that sadly, for some of these indicators of performance, Rotherham is towards the left, which means that it is towards the more challenging areas. And you can see that at Key Stage 4, where I think Rotherham is within the bottom 20 of areas in the country. I know that you will know this. And there's just to confirm it for Key Stage 4, but you'll be aware of this, and this is the reality of the context in which we're working. If it's any consolation, Sheffield and Barnsley are slightly even worse than Rotherham, so that it's not that we're being competitive about this. And this is a graph that you may have seen, looking at things that have happened in the last few years, looking particularly at Key Stage 1 attainment, what information we have. Some of these are not exams, some of them are TAs and stuff, but this is the kind of figure that we're seeing, that all children have been affected in the last few years, but you can see that disadvantaged children are affected more than their peers. I showed you some research on COVID from the EF-NEFER report, and there's a link to this in here. This is the most up-to-date data that I can find, and I'll just bring these up as they come and let you read through them. So year 3 on average are doing okay. Year 2 have caught up on maths, but their reading is still behind. These are national average data, so you may have your own local data that's different to this. But one thing that seems fairly consistent across the country is that those children who are very low, some years away from their chronological age in terms of reading, these have increased, and so that you may well have, whereas perhaps you might have had 1 or 2 very low readers in your classes, you may now have 3 or 4 is the suggestion from the figures. And that again, year 3, there's a similar sort of thing, not quite as bad as perhaps year 2, but similar sort of figures in year 3. I know that there are 1 or 2 secondary colleagues in the meeting today. The report focuses mainly on primary, I'm afraid. One last thing that you might want to go and check is what's called the Families of School database. I don't know whether people have discovered this before. It's perhaps more useful than just looking at straightforward LEA league tables, because the schools in Rotherham may not be as comparable to yours as other schools are across the country. And so what you can do, again, the link is in the PowerPoint when you get it. You can go along, and it suggests schools across the country that are in similar situations and similar contexts to you, and gives you some information about how you are performing in relation to them. And again, that can be quite useful and quite interesting, particularly if you feel that your local schools are different to you. It gives you a better comparison to make. Okay, so that, I mean, I'm not going to put you back into to the chat room, breakout rooms, but I would welcome, you know, anybody who wants to say, yeah, we're seeing that, or it's matched, or I disagree, our year 3s are still behind in maths, or whatever. If anybody wants to contribute, there's opportunity now for a few minutes. Does I mean, hands up or yes into the chat, does this seem familiar? Is this a familiar picture?
I'm sure there must be some people nodding.
Okay.
Yeah,
We're sitting here nodding.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
I can't see everybody because I've got the screen up, so that's great. Okay, we'll move on. Okay, the next thing is let's just, yeah, great. Okay, the next thing I'd like you to do is to try to go to the Padlet. I'll put it back into the chat, and I think it's the first thing under session 2 is this document. And what I'm going to do is put you into breakout rooms, but I don't necessarily want you to talk for the first few minutes, and just to look through this document here, which is about your beliefs and assumptions, and then also think about if you pass this round your SLT team, if you passed it around your teachers, if you gave it to your TAs or governors, would you get similar kind of responses? And I'm going to give you about 5 minutes again to just to look through this. I find that it works best if you give your honest response first, and then you then later on, you're quite well with preferred after you've done some thinking to change, but it's quite useful just to think about that and to think also about what your colleagues might say. So I'm going to put you back into breakout rooms, and I believe that it will be there. I may just have to move 1 or 2 people around because at the moment, right, okay. Okay, it might have changed slightly because it looks like 1 or 2 people have dropped in and out of the meeting. So I will open those up and give you about 5 or 10 minutes. If you can find this document on the Padlet, that would be great.
Alistair, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go to my next meeting. But
okay.
Lynn will keep an eye on everything.
Okay, thank you.
No, but that's been great so far. Thank you.
You're in a different group, Angela Maltby. Are you able to join? Yeah, great. There are people waiting for you. Anston and Tracy, are you okay?
Sorry, Alistair, I got my internet cut out, so I didn't get into the last group, so I don't know whether that's not
Okay, let me, okay, that I can see. I'll put you in that one then.
Thank you.
Sorry, and then I shall put you in that one, Tracy. Sorry, I apologise. I hadn't noticed that you weren't assigned to a room. Are you okay, Tracy? There, can you join? And Lee, are you okay to join, or are you involved with something? Hi, folks. It looks like you're having the dreaded in and out because you're
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, it just totally went off. I could hear you.
Yeah.
Couldn't see anything, so I've had to log back in.
I'm going to be closing all the rooms in a minute, so I won't put you back in a breakout room. Yeah. But we've just been looking at that document in the Padlets, the first one. So
yeah. I've read that. That's what caused me to get logged out.
Right. Yeah. Are you okay, Tracy?
Yeah, I'm back in now. I did the same as Lee. Went to open that document, and then it like froze everything.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
You don't quite have the bandwidth to do it. Then maybe that's the problem.
Yeah. I think I've got Zoom open in my browser rather than downloading.
Meeting is being recorded.
Mine
is, yeah. Mine's that.
Okay, so that just wait while one or two people come back into the room. There's obviously some conversations that are going on there. And I know that some people didn't quite make it. And again, this is something that are we all back? Yes, I think we are all back. So that document, may have challenged you. You may not feel as though you have all the information to be able to answer that. And so that again is something that you might want to go away and take away to think about before the next session. I think that, expectations, and the last question, expectations are universally high. We've talked about that. If you're one of the schools that gets the visit from a system leader later on, it's one of the things that we will ask to do is to see groups of people within the school. And if I had a group of your TAs and asked them this question, would they be saying the same message as the teachers? That's the sort of thing that we will be looking at. And also, we're going to start exploring the data, and it's about whether you have not necessarily the raw figures on the tip of your brain, but do you know where to go for them? Do you know where to get that kind of information? And then the other thing that we'll be looking at is this idea of implementation. And the other thing to think about in terms of making these implementations is number 2. So number 1 is treat implementation as a process, not as an event. But the other foundation for good implementation is a leadership environment and a school climate that is conducive to good implementation. And, depending on what school you're in, you may have what might be called implementation overload. You might be doing lots of things and constantly bringing in new strategies. And you need to think about how does that work with the staff. You may have been able to generate a staff who like change, who like innovation, are happy with that. Probably at the moment you're thinking, I just can't face implementing anything else at the moment because I'm up to here just getting the kids into school and getting them learning. So that all of this is about the timing and the atmosphere for innovation or implementation is something that we'll look at. I was going to just put you back quickly back into groups, but I'm going to leave everybody in the meeting, and I'm going to talk for about 2 or 3 minutes more, and then you might be pleased to know that we'll have a short break for 5 minutes, which will allow people, if they need to have a drink and have a comfort break. But we're just going to be thinking about barriers to learning. If you did a staff room exercise, your next department meeting or staff meeting, give everybody a post-it and say, what are the barriers? What sort of comments would you get? And I'm just going to let you think for a minute, and then see if you would come up with some of the ones that I'm going to predict from both my experience and those of other colleagues that have helped me in the preparation of these slides. So these are the first few, and again, you might have picked up some of this. I know as I was at school, where this idea that disadvantaged children had a lack of aspiration and their parents had a lack of aspiration, it became totally ingrained, and it became so ingrained that even the staff ended up having a lack of aspiration for these people. There might be staff who say that the behavior of these children is different. You might be talking about parental engagement, that their parents don't engage. Some of the other things that people might say, that the numeracy and literacy knowledge is low. That might be things that they will say. And metacognitive strategies, independent learning. And we can unpick some of these because there might be some truth in some of them, and there may be things that we can explore. And so I'm going to talk about it after the break about the EEF toolkit and what all of these pound signs and padlocks and things mean. But pupil premium aspirations are generally low. The way to improve attainment is to raise aspirations. If we can get children aspiring to improve, then that might be a way forward. But as you can see from there, the evidence is that there's not a lot of effect of that. and the evidence behind it is weak. We don't see that it has an impact, and the relationship between aspiration and attainment is not straightforward. I'm going to go through these quite quickly. I'm not expecting you to read them. They will be there later on. Myth or reality? There's strong evidence to suggest that parental engagement interventions raise pupil attainment. And you can see that from there is some good evidence from this. That has 4 months. But we also know that it's not always easy to do, and it's hard. I know early on in COVID and lockdown, people were talking about how parental engagement was better. Teachers had a better relationship with some parents. Some parents who had never been particularly engaged with school had become engaged very quickly when they were having to do school home learning. And so, but has this drifted? Has it moved away in recent months? Is there something fundamentally different about how children from pupil premium learn compared to non-pupil premium students? And it's a few years old now, this document. You say it's 2011. It is still worth digging out. I haven't put the link into it, but I can do. And it's basically the take-home message is that quality first teaching works for everybody, and that there are no particular strategies that we need to employ. Strategies that work with all children will work with pupil premium disadvantaged children. And then literacy levels among pupil premiums are lower on average than non-pupil premiums. And it's a driver. Pupil premium and disadvantage is a driver of other symptoms. And as you know, we talked way back again earlier on, that there's less exposure to books perhaps at home, less secure relationships, less reading to children at homes. Children could be witnessing interparental conflicts, adverse childhood experiences. Some of these things can inhibit cognitive development, and this can then go on to have an effect on literacy. And so literacy is something that we are aware of for pupil premium. So that the things that we might bring out in here, some of them are myths, some of them will have a basis in truth. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop there, and when we come back, I'm going to look a little bit about what the EEF do, and also what the sort of things for you to look at and things for you to consider in the next few weeks. So I make it 8 minutes past 4. If we come back about 15:15, will that be okay? If people just have a quick break and a comfort break, and then we'll be back in about 6 or 8 minutes. Is that okay? Jamie, you've just joined us, I think. Is that right? So have you been here for a while? Can't see you. Okay. I think people are probably coming back. Okay, I make it about 1:15, so in the intention of finishing quickly or on time, I'll make a start. So as I said right back at the beginning, the research schools are funded by the EEF, and I hope that there is nobody here who hasn't heard now of the Education Endowment Foundation. And we have 3 aspects of our role. And the EEF has 3 aspects, and we're just one part of that. The first thing that EEF do is that they generate research in terms of new research, and something like 10 to 14% of all new research has been funded by the EEF, a massive commitment that this country has made to educational research. And often when you read the headlines, it says the EEF says this, or the EEF says that, or the EEF has found this out. The EEF has done very little of this. The EEF funds universities and academic groups and groups of experienced research workers to put together the reviews and the research, and these are all available down from the internet, and these are quite often complicated documents that are not necessarily something I would recommend teachers read. And from those, they synthesize this information into a more palatable form. And so the first thing that I would always recommend people look at is the Teaching and Learning Toolkit, and there's also the Early Years Toolkit. And in here, they have looked at all different sorts of aspects of education: homework, use of TAs, uniform, small class sizes, as it says there, aspiration interventions, metacognition, a whole range of different strategies, and they give an insight into how that might be useful in your school to solve a problem. But again, we now know that this requires some unpicking. Sometimes teachers can get hold of the wrong end of the stick about this. And so we have a part of the triangle is mobilization. And what they do is take the new data and the toolkit and turn that into guidance reports. And these are the documents that look something like this. And here at Notre Dame, I have a large walk-in cupboard full of these things. And so if during the session there is a guidance report that you feel you would like some hard copies of, then please, all you have to do is drop me an email, and either I can put them in the post, or if you're on my way home, I can drop them off, because I live south of Barnsley and can drive through parts of Rotherham very easily on my way home and drop those off. And so if you've never been to the other thing that we do is we've produced a pupil premium guide, and we did this a few years ago. This has now been updated, and the updated version of this is in the Padlet. And this was some research that we did some time ago, or the EF did some time ago, and came up with what we call the tiered approach, that there are 3 levels of this to do with classroom practice, to do with intervention, and then wider school activity. And this proved to be so useful and so successful that the DFE have now adopted it, and it has come part of the DFE sort of statutory guidance on pupil premium strategy, and we have to do our pupil premium strategies in the tiered response, so that we've done research that influenced government practice and policy on the periphery, and now sometimes our guidance is now being turned into more sort of upfront national policy. And so if you go to the teaching toolkit or the early years toolkit, you will see that there are a whole range of different things that you can look at, and they have this same basic format, in that there is the strand. So this is like metacognition and reading comprehension. And I'm sort of going to give a spoiler alert in some respects. This is the top of the list. And so metacognition is the thing that has the most impact and can be shown to have +7 months of impact. If you want to know how they work that out, they can. There's information that tells you. The next thing we need to look at is the evidence, and the evidence are these padlocks. The more padlocks that are highlighted, the more secure the data. So the great thing about metacognition is that it has the biggest effect, and it's also very secure. We know there's a lot of research that has backed this up, and the cost of this is quite low, so there's only £1 sign. This scale goes from a few pounds per student all the way up to hundreds of pounds per student, so that you can see that metacognition can have a big effect for a low cost. And again, with all of this, you might find that there is something that has a high impact, but the evidence is not secure. Or you might find something that has a low impact, but is very cheap to implement. And so something that might only get you 1 or 2 months might be well worth doing, particularly if it has a low cost. And you can see that we talked earlier about different workshops that we're going to be doing in the summer term, and you can see that kind of early reading comprehension strategies and oracy were things that we talked about, and one of the reasons we're looking at them is because we know that they have a big impact. What's important to remember though, sorry, I just conscious of time, and there's 1 or 2 slides that we're just going to gloss over. I put in a couple of tea break slots depending on how fast we went, so I felt we needed to have one earlier rather than just then. So what we're talking about with all of these things is that there is a danger that when we're talking about research, we think that it's going to work. It's even sometimes called what works research. And what research tells us is that when we looked at this in the past, it worked in some schools under some contexts, under certain circumstances. And what happened is that the average attainment was shifted. And so we can move the effectiveness sort of graph to the right, and the average result can get better. But we know that within this sort of average improvement, there will be some children and some schools that might make a lot of progress and it'd be highly effective. There'll be some children and schools where it doesn't prove effective, and there may even be some schools where it's made worse by the intervention and not better. And so it's very important that we realise that this research are best bets. If you have a problem, a research-informed solution is going to be your best bet. But you have to evaluate it and implement it in an appropriate manner, because it might not. And that's always going to be the caveat with educational research. Schools and classrooms are very difficult places to do research and to implement research. And so we have to do it with a degree of caution. So if we go into what we call getting under the bonnet and look beyond the effect size and the evidence strength and the implementation cost, both the teachers toolkit and the early years toolkit have been updated recently. So if you've not been for a year or so, then you might want to go back, because there's a lot more information in there to be helpful. So there is the key findings, which is unpicking some of what the headlines say. So it talks about the +7 months, but it also gives some things about what that might look like. And then also it gives you some advice about how you could implement it in your setting. So one of the things that might be interesting to do would be to look at some of the things that you are already implementing and go and look on the toolkit to see what sort of effect they might have, but also to look at the tricks that they're talking about in terms of implementation. And are you doing some of these things? All the guidance reports have this basic same structure, and what they try to do is to provide a number of recommendations. 7 is perhaps the most. The implementation guidance has 6, and the one on CPD, which is about how you might want to look at eventually towards the end of this course, that only has 4. So that they differ, and you usually find that in the middle of the guidance report, if you get the hard copy, there is a nice friendly poster for you to use and put on your wall. And some of us are sad and actually do have those on the wall because they're useful for referring to. But the important thing that we work with, and we tell teachers like yourselves when we're working with this, is that we're working here in the middle on the intersection. This is where we're talking about evidence-informed school improvement. We can share the research evidence, we can share the data, we can talk about the context where it happened, you need to blend this with your own practical wisdom, your own knowledge of your students, your own knowledge of your staff and the local experience. And then you can, this is where we're working. So sometimes you can look at research and decide, well, actually, really, I don't think that that is appropriate for my my school. And that's great. That's the kind of input that we want. Other times you might look at the research and think, well, actually, I can see that this is working in schools that are similar to us, and so maybe worth a punt. And that's where we want to be, in that intersection between the two. Okay, quick quiz time. These are all things that I've heard about pupil premium spending and pupil premium strategies. Which of these are true? Again, into the chat, or on mic, and just tell me if you prefer to do that because it's quicker. There are no prizes and no penalties. Let's have a look. Okay, so Lee's gone for 4 is true. D is true. Okay.
I meant D. Yeah, I meant D, not 4.
Okay, yeah, I got that. Okay, so few of these are true. So let's have a look at all what we're talking about. So number one, the first one, only eligible children can benefit from the pupil premium spending. One of the first things that the pupil premium guidance from the EEF showed was that one of the most effective things to do is to improve the quality of teaching. So you can use the pupil premium to help teaching and learning across the board, and we know that that will preferentially help disadvantaged children. So it could be used to change the number of classes, or to change the TA support, or it could be used to sending teachers on a course to learn a particular strategy. All of these things are things that you can spend your pupil premium money on. And the one thing that we are going to look at is in the futures, you might want to have your pupil premium strategy in front of you, and you may want to start thinking about, well, how does ours look in light of some of this? Are we spending our pupil premium in ways that can benefit all students, helping disadvantaged along the way? Your pupil premium strategy should look something like this. I don't believe that no one will have found a new system, but it's there, and there are links to it later on that you can go along and check in that you've got the right one. And the things that you can spend your on from the guidance report are shown here, and you can see that teaching, professional development, supporting early careers teachers, all of these things are not directly linked to pupil premium and are there to affect all teaching. The pupil premium has to be spent on interventions. No, it doesn't. Okay, and again, this is a myth. I hope that all of these are not as prevalent as they were a couple of years ago. You don't have to spend it on particular things. You may have to justify some of it, but you don't have to spend it on starting some new particular intervention. And this is great because this led to an intervention overload in previous years where people use their spending to do things like this, and there is no need. Pupils premium spending can be justified using school data alone. One of the tasks that I'm going to come on to and you're going to look at in perhaps a little bit of detail in this session, the next session, which is a sort of self-study one, is to realize that you might have some school data, but not all school data is the same. You might have a lot of data. Some of it may be good quality, some of it may not be, some of it may be robust, some of it may not be. And so we're going to look at what we can, or what we can and what we should gain from studying our data. And then the last one, which seemed to get a lot of agreement, this has changed from the previous question, so I'm not sure what's happened there, because that's not the question that was down for number 4. The pupil premium cannot be used to support education recovery, and again, that's not true. Lots of the you'll have some additional funding, but there's no reason to say that you can't continue to use pupil premium funding to support some of this, and we'll be looking at that again, perhaps in the next session or the session after. Out of time, I'm not going to put you into breakout rooms, but I am just going to pause for a minute, and it may be that you want to just get a piece of paper and jot a note down. If you haven't got your pupil premium strategy, it might be worthwhile making a note to go and get it. If you can lay your hands on it now because you know where it is on the school network, it might be worthwhile just bringing it up and having a think about whether some of those myths are, if not directly in your strategy, may have influenced thinking behind your strategy. Okay. So the last part of the session, we're going to start on our journey around the implementation cycle. And the first thing we're going to look at is identifying a key priority that is amenable to change. And if you have an implementation guide that's report in front of you, then it is the section 2, which is this dark, or section 3, I think is the dark blue one, which is explore, and all the pages are dark blue. As I said earlier, if you want copies of this and feel that actually you quite like a hard copy to scribble on, then please, we have some that are available, and within reason, I can provide multiple copies if this is something that you want to work on with one of your teams. All you have to do is just to let me know either in the chat later on or just drop me an email towards the end. So the first thing that we might want to do is just to stop. And this is a useful acronym for helping us to think about this. So I'll just let you just flick through and read some of this. So a few years ago, when we first started to look at this, this is before schools had maybe started thinking about implementing from their pupil premium strategy. Now we're finding that schools have a better pupil premium strategy. We're kind of in that top bit, as I said before. We may well have been round effectively in this cycle to a lesser or greater extent. We may well have identified something that we think is a priority. We may well have prepared some training. We may well have delivered some sort of initiative, and we did this last year or last term, and we're now thinking about, well, do we need to continue this? Do we need to change? We're kind of making our mind up about this. So have we really got to the nub of the problem? Are we really addressing the real cause and not just a symptom of the problem? How are we really being accurate when we're doing this? We're going to look at data in a minute, and often trends in data are actually maybe more useful than one-off snapshots. It could be that buried within the data, there are groups that are showing more of a problem than an overall average. And so being accurate in our thinking is important. Do we have a shared understanding? The most important bit that I found as a school leader when I first started using this plan was this bit down the bottom here. Assess the readiness of the school to deliver the implementation plan. Are they ready or are they not? Is this a go, no-go step? Okay. Have I won enough people over? Do I have enough teachers on board to be able to do this? Do I have my best teachers? Is this the right time to be doing it? And if not, do I have to go back and do some more thinking and do some more preparation? So often we're on timescales that says, right, we've got to do something, we've got to do it now, we've got to bring it in, and we're bringing it in when it's not the best time. And then stopping. Considering stopping doing some things. And stopping doing things sometimes requires just as much attention as starting it. Do we have data to suggest that we should stop it? Is it just something that we can just stop straight away, or do we have to prepare to stop it in a few months' time? Can we help staff? I know that when I left my last place and we were talking about the regrets, I suppose, one of the regrets that I have is that I haven't been stricter with secondary school teachers spending a lot of time doing tick and flick marking. We know from the research evidence that tick and flick marking is very time consuming and has very little impact on student outcomes. And, you know, the teachers who continue to do it were wasting their time, and I have never really successfully stopped them doing it, and they still carry on doing it because they've always done it and they feel that it's important. And getting people to stop can be difficult. And then, have we got the right evidence? Are we basing this, are we doing a strategy because it fits in well with our own beliefs? It fits in well with what we do in school? Is it really just a continuation of what we're doing because we, you know, it reassures us that we're on the right track? And so this is something that I'm going with, that when you get the information about the sort of self-study task, which will come out next week, we'll be looking at getting you to think about some of the data that you've got. And in the middle of the page of the guidance report, there is this page. I'm just quickly trying to find it in the copy I've got in front of me. It is page, why is it the pages stick together? 14 and 15 in the guidance report. And this is looking at all the different types of data and what they can and can't tell us. And so for the next 10 minutes, we're just going to look through some of this, and then I'll tie things up, and I expect to be finished shortly after 10 to 5. So, can we confidently identify a priority? Do we really know what is the priority? I always have this joke with my colleague John, who is my line manager. A priority is a priority. You cannot have more than one priority, because then it's no longer a priority. But we all do, don't we? We all have several priorities. But are they the right ones? Can we be sure that it is based on rigorous data, and that the data is relevant, and that our interpretations of that data are credible and plausible? The data that you might have collected may just be a symptom. Professor Rob Coe talks about this as multiple inadequate glances. You get little bits of information that kind of give a feel for what might be going on, but they're not really the problem. So low attainment at Key Stage 2 may appear to be a problem, but it could be that that's because of attendance, or it could be because of poor literacy in a particular group of students that is bringing down the overall average for Key Stage 2. And so it's really important that we interpret the data and use the data well. We need to gather data that is fit for purpose. And so again, does the data represent a symptom and not the real thing? And then, as I said earlier, what are the trends in the data over time? A small deficit you may overlook it, but if that small deficit wasn't there a few years ago and has gradually widened over the last couple of years, is that something that you want to nip in the bud, whereas a snapshot view might not give you that information? And so there's a variety of data that you can find, and you can look at that there. There's sort of like national test data. We do have some of that. You might have internal test data. You might be setting collective tests that you've put together. You maybe have a good degree of lesson observations, either formal observations or evidence from learning walks. You will have something from Ofsted perhaps. And you may have become increasingly adept at using interviews and surveys, whether that's talking to children or talking to adults. And all of these are useful things for the reasons that it's given there. But all of these things come with cons. And again, I'm just going to stop for a minute and let you look through some of those. Each of those types of data does have a downside. So our national test data, which we might think as being very reliable, an overall average might miss something that you can detect by a question level base. So is there one particular area or one particular type of area that children struggle with? We've been doing some work in maths, and the one area that universally the teachers in year 5 and 6 were saying that children struggle most with was the worded problems in maths. And overall maths results might be quite good, but this was one area that lots and lots of people talked about. And in secondary, your heads of department may well be using this kind of information to drill down, to look at specific topics that aren't as taught well as others. And again, surveys and interviews can be great, but we all know that people with a grudge or a gripe or something that they want to report on are really good at responding to questionnaires. Those parents that generally think things are okay, they may be the ones that you might not respond, and we've got to chase them and we've got to collate the data, and that could be additional workload. But if we use these things well, then they can give us particular insights. And again, I'll just let you pause and read through that. So without wishes again to teach you people how, because you'll be doing a lot of this, a trend in national data may well be a very useful way of doing it. Lesson observations may raise questions which you can then go back in and have learning walks on particular topics. Surveys and interviews may show trends. If you are on the app Teacher Tap, one of the great things that it does, where it's sampling questions from a wide range of several thousand teachers, they ask the same question at the same time several months apart. And so again, you can start to do that, asking the same question. Is the responses changing? Are you seeing a movement in there? But as it says, there are always weaknesses in data, and it could be everything from how the question is worded on the questionnaire, what time of the term it was sent out, and all of these things are important when we're interrogating the data. And so Are they responding to our biases? Are they skewing our interpretation? Are there gaps? Are there some year groups that haven't responded with that questionnaire? And is it the most relevant and rigorous? And again, thinking about how this might be, again, I urge you to go and read this and think about it. Is the data valid? Is the data reliable? Is it fair and consistent? Is the data collection manageable? Is it something that you can do, or are you increasing workload for data that isn't actually going to be used? And so when we're coming up with this, providing credible and plausible interpretations, we might start to, if not, not just triangulate, but bring in multiple sources of data. So we might have identified that there is poor pupil attainment in Key Stage 2 reading. And there may be various things that might back this up. And if we're starting to pull in little hints about this from multiple sources, then we may well be coming to a much richer picture. And so we could do this through lesson observations. We might find some information from internal tests. We might talk to pupil interviews and pick up some information. We might do this through learning walks. And all of this is giving us that richer picture about what's happening. And so again, I'm not going to read through all of these because that would be boring. I'll just let you read them through for a minute now. So don't avoid fitting the data to your preconceptions. You might have picked up this gut feeling about whether this is right, but show it to another colleague, show your data to another head teacher. Is this data showing you what you think it is, or is it just backing up what you already believe? We're often encouraged to go on our gut feeling, aren't we? And that's sometimes those kind of spider senses that we all have after we've been teaching it for a while, that there is something not right here, can often be a useful skill, but we've got to be sure that we're right. We don't want to use data to convince ourselves. We have an idea. We don't want to go around collecting bits of data that back it up. Data may back it up, but we've got to be open to being challenging ourselves. And then again, share your interpretation with people who might disagree with you. One of the things that we did in the first session was we did some follow-up sessions on it where we came and visited, and these were done with other head teachers. And that conversation at times can be really useful because it can be, they could be your critical friend. They can challenge you to look at your data in a particular way. And one of the things that we're going to be asking you to do in the coming weeks is to start to create a number of case studies for children in your schools, because this can sometimes be a really good way of actually identifying things that are going well, and also things that that may well be you might need to look at. And there are things that can be useful, and I know that when people started to do this task in the past, it really started to get them to think about what it's like to be a certain type of child in your school, and what their experiences are, and are they as good as you hope they would be. And so we'll look at this, and we'll look at some exemplars and how we might do that. But again, that note at the bottom there, which we're not trying to catch people out. We're not trying to find the people's deficits. What we're trying to do is to try to look at the thing as the system as a whole and try and see what the experience for some of our children might be. And so again, one of the things we're going to look at is this idea of symptoms and cause, and what are the underlying issues. And one of my colleagues has come up with this the picture on the right, which is a dandelion, and I apologize, the image has got slightly pixelated with enlarging it. If you are a gardener, you will know that dandelions are very successful, and they're very pervasive, and little bits of their roots stay in the ground long after you've pulled up the rest of them and can reproduce. And so what we want to do is to try to get right down to find out what it is that is going to cause our problem. There could be lots on the surface, there could be lots going on the top there that looks very impressive, but it's like what's happening right down the bottom there that can be important. And so the second session is going to be self-directed. And one of the things we're going to be looking at is this idea of what are the symptoms and what are the causes. The root stuff that is harder to get to. And there will be a short video for you to watch in your own time, and then 1 or 2 tasks and 1 or 2 things to bring together before the next session. So we'll be asking you to go through the stuff about the data again and getting you to think about what data you might have. This idea about existing beliefs and the things that you might have, again, is something that you might want to do. I know that amongst the cohorts this time, there are people who have been joined your SLT teams, and so that you may well have colleagues who've done this in the past. These could be good people to talk to about doing that. And then also to start looking at your own pupil premium strategy and looking at this tiered model, looking at the teaching and targeted interventions and the wider strategies, and looking at the kind of things that you're doing now. We will be asking you to share this, and again in the next session, and so it would be useful for you to have that information to hand. But all of this will be coming out next week when you've had time to digest some of this. Thank you for coming along today. I apologize because I was going to I thought there was one more slide before there that had in it my email address. So I shall put that into the chat. And for some reason, somebody set this to an American keyboard, so it didn't give me the @ So there's my email address. If there's any information I can help with between now and the next session, please be in touch. If anybody wants copies of the guidance reports, then that would be available to come and I can come from me, or people, I can post them out. Or if there's anything else that you're not sure about, please be in touch. As I say, things will appear into the Padlet, the documentation and the things we want for the next session will be in there. And I hope that this will reach you in a couple of days' time. We can put this together for you to look at before the next session. I am very, very aware of the workloads that you are all in. And so there will be a catch-up part of the next face-to-face session online, as it were, sorry, so that if you don't get a chance to do it, please do not attend the next session because you've not had a chance to do the one in between. I look forward to seeing all of you again at the next one. I will stop the recording now,